license as an agent. So the whole point is, we're not here to talk about that, but we are here to talk about how you can start getting in front of more investors, people who own multiple rental properties, and help them find out what's important to them. And they're going to disclose that to you. And frankly, I'm going to tell you what that is. And the reason why I know that, because my wife and I are investors. We own rental properties. So we're going to tell you why people want it, what happens after time, and they think they're sitting good, because people are going to say this to you every time, or almost every time. Look, I bought it for this, and now it's worth this. You ever hear that before? Rents used to be here, now they're here. My property taxes base is based on when I bought the property plus all the increases every year. So why should I sell the property if I'm doing better? And if you don't have an answer for that, you're out. But we want to keep you in the game. And that's why we're going to talk about the things that are most important to them that they're not aware of. Some of them they are, some of them they're not. In fact, when we're finished today, my business card will be back up on the screen. And I will offer you, I know if it's free, it isn't worth anything, but I'm still going to do it for free because it's worth a lot. I've got 20 different marketing letters that you can begin to start sending people who own rentals for at least 10 years or longer. Rentals means what? Condo, single family, 2 to 4, 5 and above, or any kind of commercial, industrial, business use building, even vacant land. All you have to do is connect with your title person. They will give you something called a farm package. And the farm package will include anything you want them to include, like those same properties that have been held for 10 years or longer. We call those absentee owners. They don't live in them. It's for those types of properties. And they'll give you their names. They'll tell you where they get their mail. They'll tell you where the property is located and some information about the property. And this will be very helpful to you to know where and where not to mail. All right. Though next month, my wife and I are going to celebrate our 36th wedding anniversaries, and they said it wouldn't last, right? But the bottom line is that I thought that was funny. Thank you for somebody at least smiling or laughing. But what matters most to her is my job. Frankly, what matters most to me is her job. And the more we're concentrating on the other person, the happier things are. So the question is, what's so important to an investor? Why did they come in the first place, and why would they want to stay in the property? There's 2 reasons, but ultimately it's on the heading of cash flow. What is cash flow? It's or income. Number one, cash flow is what you deposit every month for every front door you have. So if you have one front door, you get paid once a month. If you have a 4-plex, you get paid on an average in a month once a week. If you have 30 units, you get a paycheck every day. It's that simple. It's just like being in real estate. You close the deal, you get paid. Same is true as a landlord, and they know that. Many people who don't even know anything about that want to invest in property for that very reason. So monthly income is what people are wanting. They want the property to work for them so they don't have to. Make sense? But what they're also looking for is something that they don't even know about. It's called rate of return. I'm going to spend some time on that this morning, and you'll see what I mean as we move forward. All right, number 2, the second most important thing is that it's going to be worth more in the future. I just don't want to collect monthly rent, but I wanted to see it become more. Folks, it continues, never ceases to amaze me. I've been in the business actually first with the title insurance end of thing. I was a title rep for a long time, became North LA County sales manager for a very large title insurance company, and ultimately went into the exchange end, which was the best move I've ever made. But I remember when I first got into business, some of the agents had to say, look, dude, you got to calm down a little bit here. They said, like, what are you talking about? I said, interest rates just dropped, right? It's still a pretty rough market. I said, well, what are they? Last year they were 21%. Now they're at 18.5%. Try working in a market at 18.5% compared to 7% or 8%. Big difference. But the bottom line is, is that that market came down in interest rates and values started growing. Then came the 90s, and in the 90s, things slowed down through about 95, 96, and then they started pulling up again. You know, and then we saw 2004 and 2005 and 2006, and those were incredible markets. But unfortunately, they were motivated by good and bad. The bad part was stated income loans, 125 loans, and we saw, you know, the writing was on the wall, and then it all crashed and burned, and then we entered into a short sale and foreclosure market, and the experts said, you will never see in our lifetime those values of properties again because they were artificially stimulated by these liar loans. Guess what happened? Sorry? The liar loans, stated income loans. Yeah, that's what we called them. People were lying about their income. So guess what? It's higher today than it ever has been, ever in the history of mankind in the United States of America. What's the deal? Even though it goes down, it goes back up. Seasons change. We're, you know, wearing short sleeves now, whereas before I was wearing long sleeves and maybe a jacket. Transition into the seasons of weather. They'll go back again to summer, to fall and winter and rain and everything all over again. It's a cycle. And the same thing is true with the real estate market. It's a cycle. It will be worth more in the future. If the last, you know, 50 years, 75 years, 100 years, or any indication, it's going to be worth more because people still don't live here. And that's about why I'm not really sure, but the bottom line, though I've lived here all my life, it's going to be worth more in the future. 3 regrets I have in my life. Number one is I regret sometimes when I said something, I've hurt somebody, and I've kind of damaged the relationship. That's not good. Can't take it back, or you could, but the other person won't let it go. Number 2, I should have said something and I didn't. I could have made a difference, but I opted not to take that step. I regret that too. The third regret is I wish I had bought another property 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Can you relate to what I'm saying? I mean, the bottom line is that it's worth more in the future. I don't care if it crashes and burns. It comes back up again. It's going to be worth more. And that's most people's regret right there. The third reason why people want to buy investment real estate is because you get to write it off. Folks, look, the more you make, the more they take. You know, the government rewards you for making more money and working harder. They raise your tax rates. They increase your brackets. I mean, we're in LA. This is a horrible place for taxes. It's kind of a bad place for people who own property too. Yeah, because the tenants have more rights than the landlords do. And we have seen an epidemic flow since COVID, where 25% of the investors are leaving California. And if you ask them, they're going to tell you one of 2 things, maybe 3. But the highest 2 items is the laws favor the tenant. There's no balance. You have to have balance, whatever it is, you got to have balance. Second thing is, if you don't, you fall. The second thing is that the tax rates are the highest in the country. We're a mega. California is number 1 in all the states of the United States of America. And guess what's happening next year? We're getting another tax increase. And they make no bones about it. I didn't even think they were going to announce this before, you know, the election thing, right? Nobody tells you next year you're going to raise taxes. Keep it, whoop, whoop, and there goes my mouse. They keep it quiet. But the bottom line is, that's what happens out there. I know there's a positive thing, and here it is. Hopefully this will work, and if not, I guess I owe them a new mouse. But yes.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
If you have an income property in California, if you live in Florida, how does that work with the taxes?
You pay California's tax first because the property's in California that's being sold. But if you live in California and you have property in Florida, you pay Florida tax first. But since California's taxes are higher because they don't have a state tax, then you pay it all to California. You'll pay it to California because you live here, even though the property's there. So the state that you sell in always is in first position for tax-wise. If the state you live in is higher, and we are, than any state in the country, then you pay the state. The difference.
State tax right now is 11.
It's between 9.3 and 13.3. Number one in the country. So why do people like this? Because like I was speaking at your Beverly Hills office not that long ago, and one of the agents got up and said, look, I just did a 1031 exchange and I bought in Las Vegas. He goes, you know, when I moved my properties back there, or not back there, but to Vegas, he said, you know, I can buy 2 properties there for the price of 1 here. He said, but I get paid from 2 different, yeah, I realize, he said, that the rents are less. He said, but proportion for dollar of equity here versus there, you're making a higher cap rate, a higher rate of return there. So even though the values are less, the rents are less, but not that much. So the bottom line is you get more for your money in other places. He said the second thing is when I go to California, I mean from California, because I live here, he said, I get to write off my transportation. I write off my hotel. I write off my meals. I write off my gambling. No, I said, well, you can't do that one. The government won't let you do that one. I said, but the bottom line is it's a write-off. Even your interest, if it's higher, it's a write-off. It reduces the tax you pay on the rents you collect. And that's a real positive thing. So you got to have tax breaks. You also have depreciation. That's something that the CPA sets up. If it's a residential building, you get depreciated for 27 and a half years. It's not based on what you paid for the property. It's based on what the value of the land versus the value of the building is. It's the building value that you depreciate, not the land value. Your CPA, whatever you pay for it, CPA will break that into 2 parts. Could be different depending on where the property is. Obviously, the closer you get to the water versus the more inland you get, the value gets higher on the land near the water. But as you go inland, it's higher on the building, which means you get to depreciate more. The whole point is to write off and reduces the taxes you pay off the rent you collect. Those are the 3 things you got to remember before you get into these in front of these people. It's about monthly income, it's about appreciation, it's about tax write-offs. But the big question everybody asks is, so how can I make the properties work harder for me? And I got all this equity in there, right? I know what rents are. I said, how do I make the property work harder for me, right? So let's talk about it. If you're going to take a picture, this is the page you want to take a picture of. I want you to look on the left. There's 2 properties there that your client owns, A and B. Let's pretend they bought these 2 properties together in the same month of the same year. They paid the same price, same amount of down payment. They close escrow on the same day. These 2 properties are next door to each other on the same street in the same city. Same square footage, same lot size, same condition, same floor plan. There is nothing different about these 2 except for one thing. A has more equity than B. Why would A have more equity? Well, probably because he took no equity out of the property, but he did on B, right? A lot of people do take a HELOC or a second or refinance or whatever. That's the only difference, because you're going to see lots of people with different properties, and some have more equity than others, because that's the illustration I want to bring to you today. That's going to be the key of building a relationship based on what's important to them regarding the properties. Does that make sense? Okay, you got it? All right. So let's go through these 3 things we just said: monthly income, appreciation, and tax write-offs. And let's compare to see how they measure against each other. The first one is cash flow under income. Which one of these 2 properties, if this was yours, would cash flow better? Remember, everything's identical.
Except for the equity.
Except for the equity. The answer is, why would you say that?
Because
You're right.
you have a loan or less equity in B.
Less debt on A than B.
So more money is going to the principal.
Yes, or you paid it off. Folks, you know what the great American dream is? Two things. Own the property. You know what number two is? Pay the property off. That's what everybody wants to do. Why? Because there's security in that to them. Even if it was empty, they don't have a mortgage payment to make. Likelihood of that happening because of the ratio of occupied to non-occupied is very low. So that's probably never going to happen, or it'll happen for shorter periods of time. But it just makes sense for a lot of people who want to pay off their property. And I'm here to tell you today, there's nothing wrong with that if after you retire. Why? Because when you retire, guess what you're doing or not doing anymore? You're working, which means you're making less money. So it makes sense to pay off the property because the more cash flow you have, more money you can spend. Because I see you at Costco. I see you at the gas station, unless you're plugging in your car someplace. There's lots of things you spend money on after you retire. So you don't spend less money when you retire. That's just not true. Because I'm knocking out the door right now. I'm going to be 70 years old in October. And then my wife and I have been calculating, when we can finally go to retire, what is that going to look like? Because I don't want to stop my lifestyle, folks. I want to keep traveling. I want to keep doing everything. Cash flow you need. So A wins the cash flow award. But the second part of income, remember I said rate of return, and I'm going to talk about that today. Which property is getting a better rate of return based on the equity that's in the building? And most people go, what? What does that mean? Well, what's your internal cap rate? Yeah, go ahead. Because of leverage, you have more debt, you have more debt, less equity, right? Which property does better for you? I want to show you how to calculate that. If you're going to take another picture, this is the next one, but this is going to be included in the marketing pieces that I'll give you if you request them. There's no obligation or anything. This is how you calculate what the rate of return is. For example, if you refinance your property and you took all the equity out and you went to the bank, there's, I think, a Chase Bank right up here, B of A right there. Question is, what would they give you if you give them your money to sit in their bank? The answer is an interest rate. So what's the interest rate on the equity that the client has? And nobody has ever asked them that question before. And very few people have the answer. So what I did is I sat down with a couple of CPAs to say, like, what do you do when you speak to your clients to find out what a rate of return is? They said, well, that's real simple. So they gave me this. I want to go over it with you. Number one, you have to calculate the gross income, not of all your properties, just that property. And if you have 10 properties, you do this 10 times. It doesn't matter how many units, if it's a single unit or 150 unit building. It's one building per measure, okay, per calculation. So that's the gross. They already know this because that's on their tax return, because they have to tell the government every year what their gross income is. Number two, they also tell them what their annual expenses are. Everything. Anything. It doesn't matter if they're going to evict somebody, if they're going to do a tax return on the property, payment for utilities, they're getting rid of it because of rent control, whatever it happens to be. What is it costing them that year? So 1, gross income minus 2, annual expenses equals 3. That's your net, because your mom and your dad told you the same thing that mine did. It's not how much you make, it's how much you keep, right? Next, number 4, how much equity is in the building? I don't know. I can tell you how much mortgage I have. That's where you come in. You comp it out, you subtract whatever they owe, the difference is their equity, right? And number 5, you take the answer to number 3, which was the income, you divide it by number 4, the equity. And guess what that tells you? What your interest rate is. What is your rate of return that you're getting off that building when you include monthly expenses and monthly income divided by equity? And that's your rate of return. That makes sense? Okay, let's go back. Which property gives you a better rate of return based on the amount of equity that's in the building? Every time I move out, I lose the Zoom people. I mean, they're still there, but they can't see me, which is probably a better thing anyway. Which one gives you a better rate of return? Is it A, with a lot more equity or paid off? Or is it B, with a lot less equity? The answer is, who said A? Who said B? Anybody else? Okay, we have a split decision. Which one? Who's right? One of them has to be right. Is it A or B? The answer is, every time, it's going to be B. Why? Now, don't forget what I'm going to tell you. Even if you never do a 1031 exchange in your life, don't forget what I'm going to tell you. Let me ask a question. Can A, that has more equity, charge more rent than B can, that has a lot less equity? They're identical buildings, square footage next door to each other. Can A charge more rent? No. Why? Because rent isn't figured on equity. It's figured on what that fair market square foot value in that location can get in terms of an average of what other buildings like that are charging. Doesn't that make sense? The higher the equity is, the lower the rate of return is, because you can't charge more rent because you have more equity. Your rate of return diminishes. That's true in almost every fiscal situation in life. You can't charge more rent, so the rate of return goes down. And most people thought, I'm secure. Well, maybe you are, but you're making less of a return. You're getting a lower interest rate on A than you are on B. Why? Because B can charge the same rent as A can with far less equity. And if you can figure that one out, it'll change your life, it'll change your business's life and the way you can speak with people. Number two, or you can go pay a couple, $3,000 to these financial things, and they'll tell you what I just told you in 5 minutes. So you owe me a cup of Pete's next door. That's all I'll take. Okay, number two. Which property appreciates faster in an appreciating market? Is it A with all the equity or B with the less equity? Yeah. Go ahead, say it. It's on the tip of your tongue, and it's not B. I got news for you. It's not A either. Appreciation has nothing to do with how much equity there is in a building. It's based on the comps of the other buildings around there that's like those. And these are identical buildings. So they will appreciate identically because they're identical buildings. So here's my question. Which property will get a better rate of return on the equity when it comes to appreciation? Every time. Because I have less invested and I can still get the same amount of appreciation as I do with A, because the bank is on the hook with the loan. All I have to do is make the payments. Number three, which property has better tax deductions? The answer is they're almost identical, except B has got a new interest rate of 7% compared to the old one that they didn't refinance at 3%. That's a write-off. That means that comes out of the taxes you pay off your cash flow to the state, to the feds. So it's going to be B. Folks, it's not what you thought it was. I think once upon a time, like 10, 12, 15 years ago, Mercedes-Benz had a commercial, and I thought it was brilliant. It says, not everything is what it appears to be. And everybody thought that a paid off property is the best way to go. from a financial point of view. It's not until you what? Retire. Then it makes sense because you're in it for the cash flow. Okay. Isn't that cool? If I just stopped here, this would be worth it. It really would. Okay, next. If I sold a property, I pay a capital gain. Because we only have what, like an hour and 15 minutes or so in our class today, I can't go through all the details of it. You'll just have to take my word for it. The CPA has to do a calculation. They're going to take the sales price. They're going to subtract what you bought it for. And that what you bought it for is called an adjusted basis. That's going to include things like capital improvements, reduction of depreciation, closing costs. Those kinds of things have to be put into that $300,000 purchase price to come up with an answer of a capital gain. And you pay taxes on the gain, and it has absolutely nothing to do with how much equity you have in the building. Zero. You pay taxes on that amount. Now, if you go to sell today, based on today's tax rate, now next year it's going to go up. And this election is a really big deal. It's going to determine what's going to happen from a tax point of view in many different ways. Not only your capital gains rate, but the estate tax is sunsetting next year. Does anybody know what that means? Yeah. Yeah, that means it's going to revert back to what it was, or whoever the new administration is, whether we keep the same or we get a new one, are going to change it. Currently, when you die, you know what an estate tax is? Estate tax is when you die, and then your estate, if it's over $12 million, they pay a tax between 35 and 55% on what's over the 12 million. You know what happens at the end of next year? It goes down to between 3 and 5 million. Nationwide. And you die, and it goes into effect.
Estate tax.
That's called the estate tax.
Right.
Some people call it the death tax.
Right. On someone's entire net worth, not just their property.
Yeah, everything else. Absolutely. And the government gets 30, depending on 35 to 55% tax.
Over 35.
Yeah, today, it's 12 and a half. Anything about, it will revert back to that, or they'll even go lower, because I've already heard people, some people in Congress have put it to 2 million, which is insane, because of what property costs. It's just so, the properties are worth so much now. It's just a windfall for the government, and it's a losing proposition for the American people. So this is today's capital gains tax. That's why I telling people, before you vote R or you vote D, why don't you find out what politician actually thinks? Nobody asks them about this stuff because they don't want to talk about it, because they say, oh, it's going to cause a lot of problems. But here it is. So the IRS will collect on an average 15%, but if you're in a higher tax bracket, they'll charge you up to 20% of whatever your capital gain is. Every time you sell your home, a second home or vacation home, a rental, business use property, vacant land, whatever. Number two, you have to pay the healthcare tax. Anybody hear of that? It's called the Affordable Health Care Act. You remember when they passed that? It's Obamacare. Well, when they passed that, they said if you're selling anything like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and real estate, you pay, if your gain is at least $200,000 or more, you pay an additional 3.8% to the health care. Number three, you pay the state of California. That's where I came up with the 9.3 to 13.3. You pay 1, 2, and 3 when you sell your personal residence, your second home, your vacation home, your rental property, your business use property, or your vacant land. But if you're selling an investment property, the government tacks on another tax. It's called the 25% recaptured depreciation tax. Remember, you got to depreciate your investment in your business use properties? Well, the government taxes you on the tax write-off they gave you. Folks, I'm not making this up. I teach this to the tax attorneys and the CPAs, not to mention a lot of other groups. That is a real tax. So if you had $400,000 of write-off of depreciation, you automatically owe $1,000, $100,000, plus the tax on 1, 2, and 3. This has been nothing but bad news. Now for some good news. Finally, in 1921, believe it or not, that was before I was even born. In 1921, the federal government Congress created something called the 1031 tax-free exchange, deferred exchange. I had to explain this on the way up here today to somebody. I was on the phone the entire time. They go, what does that mean? That means you defer your tax. That basis of what you pay for the property and all the gain in your property goes with you to the next investment property to re-leverage the property. Why is re-leveraging so important? Because the higher your equity, the lower your rate of return is. This lets you take this into other areas, other states, other counties, other cities, and lets you buy better properties for yourself. So you could have more income because now you have more doors. Number two, when properties go up in values, because they will again, they'll all go up. And number three, gives you more tax write-offs off your income. That's why the government created that, because every time you sell a property, the government is happy because you get to pay tax. Not just those people, but you, because you have to pay taxes on anything you make. And so does your escrow people, and so do your title people, and so do your exchange people, and all those other people you have to involve in a transaction all have to be paid. So two things happen. We all have to pay taxes to the IRS and to the state of California. And number two, we go out and we spend. Ask my wife, she'll tell you. And the bottom line is when you go out and spend, other people make money. Other people have to hire employees. They have to pay taxes. They go out and spend. And it just stimulates the economy.
I don't mean to say you can keep it's a couple, you can keep some of the money you did in the property for like the past 3 years.
Yeah, that's called the one, you should write this down, called the 121 principal residence exclusion. So if it was your primary residence, you can, as long as you've lived in there for at least 2 years, or 2 out of 5, the last 5, or, and you have to have owned it at least 2 years.
And it's, I think, 150,000 per person.
250 per person, yeah.
So does the 1031 tax deferred exchange have to be done within a certain time period once you sell the home? Or?
Yes, I'm gonna talk about that in the next few minutes. It's in one of the slides. Residence exclusion. That's not for your second home. It's not for your vacation home. It's not for your business properties. It's not for your rentals. It's only the one you live in. Now, guess how many the government says you can have at one time? Exactly.
It has to be your primary residence.
It has to be.
Right. But if you don't live in it for 2 years and you rent it out for free, you can do a temporary rental.
No, because 2 plus 3 is 5. You haven't lived in it 2 out of 5 anymore. But if you lived in it for 2,
Yeah,
you rent it for 2,
yeah,
and then you sell it and close it before the end of that last year,
yeah.
you've lived in it for 2 out of 5. So you get both, the 250 and the 1031 exchange.
You get the 1021.
1031.
1031.
Yeah.
Because it was 2 and 2.
Yeah, because remember, it's based on the day you closed your sale. So if you can look back and say, because 5 years is what, 60 months? If you lived in it 24 out of the last 60 months, you qualify. You just do. And you can do it one time every 2 years. So once you qualify for that, but if you had converted, it's been a rental the last 2 years, you still lived in it 2 out of 5. You could sell it. You could do both. Isn't that cool?
Both.
121 and 1031.
That's what I think, okay.
Isn't that cool? And when you die, I had a nice conversation about this. Somebody called me up, I want to do an exchange. You know where I live, don't you? I live in Whittier. Can I get more specific? I live next door to Rose Hill Cemetery. People dying to get in that place. I'm telling you, it's a hot area. Especially on Mother's Day, you should try to see the lines of people bringing flowers for mom, their dead mom. But the thing is, my mother-in-law is actually there. But the whole point is, oh, if you have a trust and you die, this lady was trying to, I said, she called me up, I said, I don't think you need to do a 1031 exchange. Go back to your estate planning attorney. She said, why? My dad owned it for all these years. He was 91 years old. He owned the property for 30 years. Well, guess what happened with his trust? If he had, not every trust is like this, but most of them are. When you die, your surviving spouse or your kids don't get the property with that very low basis and very high gain. It resteps, it changes to the fair market value the day he died. And that's what the kids or the surviving spouse gets. And they turn around, use lists and sell the property, they pay zero. And it has to be that way. So my suggestion is your client, you should have three good references. Number one, to a really good estate planning attorney that you can refer your clients to. Number two, a really good CPA who understands real estate and what I'm talking about. And number three, a fairly competent 1031 exchange person. I don't know where you're going to find somebody like that, but I can only guess. But does that make sense? Those are people on your team. When people use them, they use you because you referred them. They're on your team. And you're not allowed to give legal or tax advice, right? So this is really a cool thing. Next, what properties qualify for the 1031 exchange? I need to pick it up a little bit. There's only one property that qualifies, and it's called what? Investment property. But how do you define that word investment? Because you ever heard people say, well, that's my truth, that's your truth. If it isn't true, it doesn't matter whose truth it is. It's not everything can be true, folks. That's just the way life is. So what the government tells us when it comes to paying taxes, that's true. It has to be investment property because people think their second home is an investment. It's not, I'm sorry, not according to the government. So there's only 3 definitions. You know what they are for real property or investment property? Number one, have you been renting it the last 2 years? If you have, it qualifies for 1031 exchange as investment property. End of story. Number two, does that say commercial or residential? It does not. It doesn't matter. It could be commercial, residential, industrial. It doesn't matter. Number two, if you are using it, you're an owner user in your business. So you have a factory, or you make stuff, or you print stuff, whatever you do, or you sell real estate out of it. It's got to be set up that way by the CPA. But if you've done that for 2 years, you can do a 1031 exchange on the part of the building that you occupy for your business or the whole thing, if the whole thing is dedicated for the business.
Is that included Airbnb?
Yes. Good question. Very good question. Number 3, vacant land qualifies as investment. You're like, I'm not charging rent and I'm not running a business out of it. So how can it be investment? Well, why do you buy vacant land? It'll appreciate. The government considers that as investment property. And then they go on to say it has to be a like-kind property. So what does that mean? That means the sale of investment into the purchase of investment. In other words, if you sell any one of these 3, you can go into any one of those 3. You can go from residential to commercial or the other way around. You can go into an owner-user building, or you can sell an owner-user building and buy a single-family rental.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Hey,
I'm hearing
sorry.
voices.
What if they are renting out part of their home?
Oh, that's a good question. It's the next slide. You're very prophetic here. Look at the top part, your primary residence. What if it's a 4-unit building? And you live in 1 unit, but you rent out the other 3. You do the exchange on the value of the 3 pro rata units. You take the 121 on the personal part that you live in. So there's 2 splits on taxes, and the government will let you do an exchange on the rental portion. Same thing is true on a business. Make sense?
Yes, but what if they are renting a place, in this case, San Luis Obispo, and they're there half the year, and then they live in their residential ownership home
That's personal use.
half the year. So it would still be considered a split personal use if they're renting
Yeah,
out
but the
part of that.
government only gives you 1 primary residence in
Gotcha.
your time. Yeah, so you'll have to decide with the CPA, which is the primary residence, so you can sell and take the 121. The other one, you may want to convert from that other part-time into a rental, rent it 2 years, sell it and do a 1031 exchange.
I'm sorry for the miscommunication. No, they are renting a property that they stay in personally. So would they, because it'll show that they've been paying rent at a different property in SLO, but then they also come back to the property that they own here in LA and they rent out the first floor.
So what are they renting, San Luis Obispo or LA?
They're renting personally for themselves, not as an income property, but they're renting it to live in SLO, and then they own a home here in LA.
Yeah, here's the deal. They better talk to a CPA, because when you're renting from yourself, if it's business use, that's probably okay. But if it's personal use, you may have a problem.
Gotcha.
Your CPA is going to have to explain this in such a way that the government's going to buy into it, especially if they audit you.
Gotcha. Okay.
I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
When would it make more sense to do a 1031 exchange as opposed to taking the equity out of the home and buying it?
Oh, both could work if you're trying to releverage. If you really like that property and it's in a good location,
One more beneficial than the other.
yeah, just refinance it and buy something else, another rental. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
So in other words.
But some people don't want the property anymore. Some people don't want that property.
1031, you have to sell it.
Oh, yeah, you have to sell it.
Right. What I'm saying is, as opposed to taking the equity out and buying,
It's another option.
it's a different option. Is one any more beneficial than the other?
Yeah, if they want to keep the property they're currently renting out. If they feel that that property is in a prime location and would do better for them, then refinancing it and buying something else could be a good option.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, really. Your second home, your vacation home, your business, flipping and developing, those are not exchangeable. Because you got to rent these things out, or you have to move into it and run a business on it. If you're not doing that, it's nothing but a flip. The IRS calls the flip a 4-letter F word, F-L-I-P. It's not a real happy word for them. They don't like it. It's almost never exchangeable. I've seen a couple of them done, but it's rare. I got to pass some of this stuff. This one I just have to mention because I'm standing in the middle of it. ULA. The mansion tax, hopefully they're going to repeal that, because I know personally some of my clients are coming in lawsuits against the city of Los Angeles because that was done illegally. And the bottom line is you cannot let people who don't own property decide how much they pay in transfer tax. It's the most insane thing I've ever seen. But I just saw the new transfer taxes for from the county recorder's office too, for county tax. It's actually, these people are out of their minds. I mean, there's no more profit. Why would you want to do this anymore? It doesn't make sense. But you cannot, the reason why I'm showing you this is because you can't defer this. You have to pay it. Even if it's 1031 exchange property. But the good news is it's a one-time cost to sell, so it can come out of the equity of the building, and the government will allow you to do that. So that's a good thing. what do you do when you set up a 1031 exchange, or how do you know? First question is, are they renting it out? Are they running it as a place of business? And the thing is that if that's the case, you should always ask them, like, why are you selling the building? What are you planning on doing with the money? Why? Because you want to help them, not just get the listing on this one, but help them buy the replacement property, or at least, KW is huge. You get a nice referral fee from another KW person who's maybe in Arizona or, wherever they want to buy. So, or Northern Cal, so that's in it for you. But the thing is that you have to set up. First, two things you have to do real quick. Number one, when you set up, you get a new listing, you go into your agent's private remarks, and you put that in the MLS, you'll put that in your agent's private remarks. Seller's doing a 1031 exchange, buyer to cooperate, no cost to the buyer. That's fine. But that's not the contract. That's the listing contract. It's not the sales contract. So this sales contract has to have this zip form called the SXA form. It's the seller's intent to exchange zip form. Why is that so important? Because you remember what you typed in? That's in it at the beginning. But the second part is really important. Like this lady called me up today, and I'm going to talk about this briefly. I think I need to do a reverse exchange. A reverse exchange means I'm just afraid, because of timing that we'll go into, I just won't have the time to find the right property, because the government puts you on a tight leash in terms of how long they'll give you to find that property and to close it. So they said, can I just close a purchase first? I said, well, yeah, you can. That's a reverse exchange. We'll talk about that in a minute. But if that's not their plan and they can't afford to buy something without selling this one first, and they can't float that kind of money, then I want you to look at item number 4. That you can write contingency language in. And what kind of contingency could you negotiate? Number one, that my seller who's doing the 1031 exchange, if they haven't found the property at the end of our 60-day escrow, reserves the option to extend it another 30 days. Number 2, also, it isn't just finding and getting into escrow. They want to approve a physical inspection report. Make sure they're not buying a horrible disaster. And number 3, make sure the title is clean on that property, so they don't find out after they close their sale that they're living in, that there's a title nightmare, because there's a cloud on this thing, and it may take a year to solve, because that way exceeds the timing that the federal government gives them to close their purchase, because they can't, because the title isn't right. So those are things that you can put in and negotiate with your seller. So you'll find out in just a second the 45 days that you have to identify begins at the close of the sale. You can't extend the 45 days. Well, guess what you can extend? Escrow. Push that down so when you do finally close, that's when the 45 days begins. It just makes it a lot easier. And people say, oh, well, buyers will walk away. Really? Huh. Oh, I thought it was just the seller who's doing the 1031 exchange has a inventory problem. Could it be the person who's buying that property also has an inventory problem? Because they're both buying out of the same inventory. Does that make sense? So there's ways to negotiate this thing, which is a really cool thing. The second thing is, look at the red part. The exchange must be set up with escrow between us or whoever you use and escrow before escrow closes. Every Monday, except this week, which is Tuesday, because it was a 3-day weekend, I get these calls. I closed the escrow on Friday. I need to set up a 1031 exchange. You can't unscramble the egg and put it back the way it used to look. It just doesn't work that way. The government will not allow that to happen. End of story. So this is really important. There's also something called the BXA, the buyer's intent to exchange zip form. That's when you go to buy the replacement property. This is a really good form too. We will also give your client a proof of funds letter, so you know to the penny what we're holding for the seller, who's now the buyer, who's doing the 1031 exchange. So we'll give evidence of that. Plus this form, it shows the seller that you are a very, very serious buyer. And you got to close.
1031 exchange, how does that look like when a seller is exchanging and wanting to buy in a different country?
You can't.
Yeah.
It has to be anywhere in the US to anywhere in the US. So if you want to buy in Brazil, you want to buy in, I don't know, Israel, because maybe you think, you know, with all the bombing, you can get a better deal on property there, whatever it happens to be. The bottom line is that, yeah, it has to be US to US. But you can do foreign to foreign. You can't mix the two together. Most people don't realize that if you own property as a US citizen or as a US taxpayer and you don't report your foreign properties on your tax return, that's tax fraud. California has a world tax on top of what I showed you. World tax. So does the US. Yeah, okay, so let me say it one more time, just so I can be really clear. The government wants your money. If that's not evident yet, I don't know what to say. All right, next. And we have all kinds of different exchanges. Maybe we'll come back and do a part 2 at some point, but let me show you what, at least the ones that are used most. This is the one that's used by far the most, 80% of the time. It's called the delayed exchange. Delayed means what? Late. Well, the government said, close the sale first, but you have 180 days to close what you're gonna buy. But then that 45-day leash is the first 45 days of that 180 days, and it begins at the close of the sale. So you can't extend that, but you can extend the closing so this doesn't begin. Make sense? Okay. And if the 45 days lands on a weekend or a holiday, you know, like what we just had, you get to the next business day? Nope. It's that day or before. There's no next business day. They don't care if it's a holiday. They don't care if it's a weekend. They don't care whose birthday it is. You know, MLK, Jesus Christ. They really don't care whose birthday it is. It is what it is as far as the US government is concerned. How many properties can I name? 3. Up to 3 under the 3 property rule. You can buy any one of those 3. You can buy all of the 3. You can buy 2 of the 3. It's whatever you want. Especially people that are moving out of California. They're playing places like Las Vegas or Florida or Texas or North Carolina, South Carolina, all over the place. Some of those places are less, so they need to buy 2 properties. And that's okay too, as long as it's on this list at the end of day 45. How many times can I change the list? 100 times, but not after day, perfect, not after day 45. This is what I was just talking about. This is a reverse exchange. This costs more, but for those of your clients who really do have cash, everybody says they don't have anything. They're lying to you. That's not true. If they've owned properties for 10 years, they have something. And the bottom line, most of them at least, maybe not all of them, some of them can float cash and get a loan to close the purchase first. Some of them can go in all cash. But this exchange was designed and requested by the taxpayer to the government. We testified in front of the IRS. It took them 10 years to come up with this. They let you close the purchase first in a market where there's not a lot of inventory. Or, anybody know what that is? That's opportunity knocking at your door. What if you found the right property? And if you don't put an offer and get it into escrow, you will lose it to another buyer. It lets you close the purchase first. And then close your sale up to 180 days later. That's why it's reverse. It's backwards. Instead of closing the sale and then the purchase, 45 days to identify, 180 days to close, it's backwards. We have to set it up as a reverse exchange. You close the sale within 180 days after the purchase. Up to 180 days after the purchase. There's a lot of detail that goes into this. We don't have enough time to talk about it today. This is a really good deal. It costs a lot more. It's $8,000 versus $1,250. It's like almost $7,000 more. So I said to the lady today, I said, why would somebody want to spend $7,000 more to do a backwards exchange? The answer is, or the answer is, I know I can sell. There's plenty of buyers out there. What if I can't find what I want at the end of the day, 45? Then you pay all the capital gains taxes, and that will cost you tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. It's up to the person. I tell them, I'm not here to talk you into anything. It's a menu. Can you imagine if you walked into a restaurant, you say, you know, I'll have the hamburger and fries, and they go, you look like you don't really need that. Oh yeah, I take pizza. You look like you had too much pizza lately. I think you should have a salad. You know, it's like, who are they to tell us what to order? You know, it's like, well, I feel the same way. My job is to let everybody know what your options are. The client's job is to choose what they want. That makes sense? People really appreciate that, and they're very grateful for it. Let's pass on this. Let's pass on this. We can talk about all this stuff next time. I want to talk about this. This is very important because too many people screw this up. And I have to undo what the client was mistaken on and explain to them in a very nice way to keep them calm. This says two things have to happen when you're exchanging. All the money, that word all, what does that mean? Most of it? Some of it? All of it has to go into the acquisition. You don't do that, you pay taxes on the part that does not. You have a partial exchange, and that's okay. Number two, if your loan the property you're selling has a loan balance that has to be paid off, you have to reborrow that. The government doesn't let you walk away from debt. If you're paying off debt, you have to replace debt. But you'll see what I'm going to show you how that works right now. Hopefully it'll make sense. You have closing costs when you close this property, right? Commissions, escrow, title insurance, transfer taxes, recording fees, exchange fees. Those are all non-recurring. I'll go over that more in just a minute. That's non-recurring. But there are recurring stuff that has to be paid off sometimes on a sale, like property taxes, that's recurring, insurance, HOA fees, maintenance, prep of the property to sell it. Those are ongoing. That cannot be taken out of the proceeds, only the non-recurring. What are those? Commissions. Yippee. Escrow, title, transfer taxes, ULA and county and whatever else may come up. Recording fees. Kind of recorder, right? My fees. Yippee. And I love this last one. Any contractual agreement between seller and buyer for either repair or credit says something that's not right on the property. So if you come, even if it's a maintenance thing, it's a recurring problem that they have, electrical issues, plumbing issues, dry rot issues, landscaping issues, whatever, plumbing issues. If the buyer asks the seller to fix it, they can pay for it out of the proceeds of their sale. And the government says, we understand. You got this one right. The next thing, really, right? Or you can credit it to the buyer. And the buyer then will take care of it. It's as good as it gets. So what does it look like? Here's what it looks like. If you sell a property for $1 million, I had to go around to park my car halfway down the street right after the B of A down there. I saw some parking spaces. I also noticed you have some very nice homes around here, right? Well, this $1 million is maybe a down payment. I'd earned some money deposit. But the bottom line, if you sold for $1 million, when you look at all your non-recurring closing costs, your commissions and all like that, let's say it's 7%. So what's 7% of $1 million? 70,000. So you get to subtract that. You could pay for it out of the proceeds of the sale. That leaves you a balance of 930. Did you know under number 6, that's your new minimum purchase price? You'll hear exchange companies all the time tell you you have to buy equal or greater. If you buy $1 above, that isn't what equal or greater means. It's of the 930. It's not of the gross sales price because you're allowed to take out the one-time non-recurring closing cost. Now, if you have loan balance that needs to be paid off, well, guess what's going to come out of your proceeds? The loan balance. In this case, example, it's $400,000. First, a second, a HELOC, line of credit, hard money, whatever. Now you have only left $530, but you're supposed to buy for $930. So guess what you have to do to get back to $930? You gotta reborrow the loan or bring in new cash. Or I've got a couple of suggestions I could show you on here. You have to replace the cash, you have to reborrow the debt. But what if I want to be able to paint the new property, get it ready for rent, fix a couple things? Can't use the money from the equity to do that. It's for the purchase of the property, not that stuff. Next, how about if I spend money preparing the property I'm selling? No, that's repair, that's maintenance. That's not a non-recurring closing cost unless the buyer asks you to do that. And then it becomes a contractual condition of sale. Then you can. But it's already done. You already did it. Next, how about keeping extra cash to pay off bills? I've literally had people ask me, well, can I just refinance the property so I can pay off my credit cards so they'll lend me the loan on a new purchase? Or like, no, it won't let you do that. So how about over borrowing? You know, some people over borrow in the new, like sometimes, I'm sure your lenders here don't do it, but some do. Pad it by like $5,000 or $10,000. So the buyer, when they close the acquisition, gets a little bit of cash because they over padded the loan to make sure that the buyer didn't have to bring in any extra cash. Remember, all the money from the sale has to go into where? Purchase. It's coming to you. That's taxable. Don't overborrow when you go to buy your replacement property. Warning, warning, warning. It's all these things are taxable. How do you replace a mortgage? You get a lender. You can bring in new cash. So remember there was $400,000 of payoff that you had to reborrow? If you have $400,000 in the bank and you want to put it in your purchase, now you don't have to get a loan. You just effectively replaced your loan balance with new cash that came out of your savings account or wherever you want it to be. The seller can carry back for you the $400,000. You could assume the seller's loan, especially if it has a lower interest rate and it's assumable, or any combination of the above. And that's what equal or greater really means. 1 million turned it into my example into 930,000 or higher. What if I bought for 920,000? Because I got a really good deal. Then you pay taxes on the $10,000 and the rest of your exchange is good. Make sense? Okay. We do the EMD. I'm gonna have to skip a couple things. We only have 4 minutes. Can I exchange into a REIT or a DST? The answer is no on a REIT. What's a REIT? It's a real estate investment trust. When you go to talk to a stockbroker, you buy a REIT. There's public REITs, there's private REITs. Those REITs, that stock you buy, owns property. Can I exchange into that? Nope. You're not buying the property. You're buying the stock. That's not like kind. It has to be another property for another property. Does that make sense? A DST is a shopping center where you buy a fractional part of it. It's a business use. You own that fraction with other people you'll never meet. It's sort of like a REIT, but you're actually buying property, not stock. And you leave it alone for the next 6 to 10 years. You get a monthly payment. When that DST sells, you can exchange it back into another DST or back into your own individual property, as long as it's like kind, like we said earlier. Can I buy into an LLC or a partnership? And I want to talk about that more maybe the next time we come, because LLCs and partnerships are different tax entities. I want to show you. This is really important. You see this green part on the bottom? You're not a name, as long as you know that. You're not a name. To the government, you're a tax ID number. You're either EIN, like an ITIN, you're a LLC, you could be a social security number, but you're really the tax number of that entity, whether it's your name or some other entity you're part of. So the bottom line is, when you're selling and doing an exchange, since you are a number, the number that sells, your tax ID number has to be the same tax ID number that buys. That's really important. That's why you can't buy into a partnership, because you have to take on the partnership's tax ID number. But we can buy together as tenants in common, where I have an unfractionalized interest and you have an unfractionalized interest. So even if you own 70% and I own 30%, as long as I keep my ID the same in that part of the title, it's a good 1031 exchange. Can I move into the property? No. You can't buy it with the intent to move in, or it's not like kind. It has to be rental, right? Or business use. But we also know that life, even though you can't buy it with the intent to move in, life can change. Holding for investment could change. Unpredictable things, unexpected, unforeseen, unplanned. Your spouse can die. They can divorce you, or you can divorce them. Medical issues. It could be financial issues. Please never answer this question. Tell them to verify it with their CPA. You're giving them tax advice. You can't do that. They'll sue you, I'm telling you, they will. Especially after they get audited and they lose. But you told me. Well, no, I didn't. They hear what they want to hear anyway. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so if you buy an investment property, say with 3 units, and then you come in and one of them.
You're exchanging into the 3-unit value part, not the part you're living in.
Right.
And that is acceptable.
That's the 121 and that's the 130.
Yes. But the part that you're going to be renting out has to be equal or greater than the part than what you sold. With the same tax ID number. Same tax ID number. In other words, it's still you. Can I buy my trust? Yeah, most, not all, but most of your trusts are your tax ID numbers. They're under your social security number, but not all of them. Like a revocable is, irrevocable it's not. There are AB trusts, like the lady who called me today. That's up to the interpretation of the estate planning attorney. But just gotta be careful. Okay, there's other stuff that we just don't have time for, unfortunately. And I don't want to overwhelm you because I probably already have. But even questions that every investor needs to ask. How do I create more cash flow? Releveraging. The higher your equity, the lower your rate of return. That's just the fact of life. You know, how do I get greater appreciation? By taking some of the equity out, whether you're borrowing and buying or selling and doing a 1031 exchange. Now, when appreciation comes, you're appreciating with multiple properties, not with all your equity in just one building, because that's the only building that's going to appreciate. How can I reduce stress and time when I get older, especially? The answer is, I don't want to be a landlord. So I go into a triple net lease property or a DST. So maybe my new my new tenant is CVS or Starbucks, or these people downstairs, Pete, whoever you own, if you own that, you lease it to with a corporate lease. You're done. They pay, do you know they pay for the property taxes? Not you, the owner, they do. They pay for the insurance on the building, not you. They pay for the maintenance on the building, not you. You're out. You just own the property. It's completely leased and taken care of by that tenant under a triple net lease. So you can do that or go into a TIC building, those tenants in common, or the DSTs, where they just own a part of it. And they're done with it. You don't have to have continual money come, all the money comes in. It's great. It's really important how you hold title, because this one guy called me up today and said, you know, what happens when he's been married to his wife for 15 years, but it's always been under her name. So who has to do the exchange? Is it just her? Can it be the two of us to buy the new property? So I gave him some advice and some ideas to talk to a CPA about. But the bottom line is, these are all really important questions that when you begin to start talking with people, you know, these letters can prompt the conversation. And let's face it, we're in the relationship business, you know? We really are. I mean, in this bag I sell exchanges, in your bag you sell real estate. The goal is to get to the heart of the matter with the person about what could be creating. I even have letters for people who own property in California who don't live here anymore about exchanging their properties closer to where they live. Or I also have letters, one letter, about people who are disgruntled here, who want to take their properties and go other places, and how they can find out they don't have to pay the taxes and do that through a 1031 exchange. These are all listing makers for you guys. So, thank you. If you want my letters, I've got some business cards here. Send me an email. It's not my corporate email, but that's my personal email. But it doesn't matter because they both go to the same place. PhilAtwan@gmail.com. Say, give me the letters, and I'll say under one condition. Okay, what's that condition? Use them. They're not going to do any good sitting in your computer. You've got to get, I'm going to share a 4-letter word with you. If you repeat it, I'll deny it. But I guess I'm being recorded, so I can't. 4-letter word, W-O-R-K. You work it, they will come. They can't come if you don't plant the seed. They will come. It'll take time, but it will happen. I hope this was helpful to you. You're always welcome to give me a call if you have any questions. That's my phone number up there. You get my voicemail, leave a message.